sometimes you just get tired. And if you've watched my grief documentary, in the midst of, I chose to grieve solid every day for 45 days. And somewhere in the middle, I was so exhausted that death didn't scare me. I didn't have a plan to complete suicide or anything like that. But they're like, why? I'm tired. This is really hard work. Your struggles are impacting you. How does that land when I say that? Does it land like, oh, absolutely, my struggles are impacting me? Or do you feel kind of negatively challenged that you have overcome so much? And I do believe that you have overcome so much. Maybe you have 6 ways that it has impacted you, the traits that you have because of your struggles. And maybe most of them are positive. Or maybe you're really struggling with depression and anxiety and your struggles are negatively impacting you. I, unfortunately, often resort to the negative first. I have to work through the negative till I can find the positive. I have been through unimaginable pain. And the quote that is often shared with me is, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And sometimes that quote just makes me want to say, forget it. And sometimes that quote, I say to myself, you're right. I am stronger. My name's Cristi Bundukumara. I happen to be a psychiatric nurse practitioner, which means I am trained as a mental health professional. But more importantly, I have been through extreme pain, a lot of grief and trauma. And I remember I struggled with depression before I had a reason to be depressed. I remember in my early 20s, adolescence and early 20s, feeling depression. And then I worked through a lot of those things with a little bit of professional help, but mostly like self-development and just making choices that I was proud of. And then I got married in my early 20s. I had 2 children, adopted 5 children, and really thought I'm doing my purpose. I am doing life. I am not depressed. I am proud and confident. And then in 2005, one of my adopted sons died in a drowning accident, kind of hit in the face, like a huge struggle, just mentally, emotionally. I also adopted 2 of his biological sisters and wanting to care for them and how his death impacted them. Just a huge struggle. And then within a year, in less than a year of Johnny's death, my biological son, Reggie, began having seizures that wouldn't stop. And in Reggie's life, he had 10 years of what I call medical trauma. Me rushing him to the emergency room, thinking he was going to die. Having a seizure, breaking a femur, in the ICU, and the doctors coming to me and saying, you have to let your son go. He's going to die. 10 years of that. In the midst of that, I'm, trying to raise all my other children, and there was teen rebellion and just lots of things that, it's their story, so I don't want to share the details of it, but it impacted me as this is my struggle. And so I'm struggling and struggling. And when you feel like life is just kicking you and kicking you and kicking you, maybe even punching you in the face, that's how I felt in the midst of fighting for Reggie's life and all of the other struggles going on. And then Reggie died in 2016, after me as mom believing that I could save him. But my struggles weren't even over. I thought they were. I started mentally strong. I was trying to find positive traits, being stronger than my struggle. And then my daughter, Maya, died in her sleep of sudden, unexpected death and epilepsy. And that is my biggest grief. I've also lost my husband to the same disorder, but I can tell you that day changed me forever. And so when we talk about traits that happen as a result of struggle, I know struggle. We all know struggle. But what are traits that come up when somebody has been through that kind of struggle? I want you to get out a piece of paper and just write down traits that come up for you, both positive and negative, traits that come up for you as a result of your struggle. I want you to click on the link, give me your email address. Let's continue to follow in this journey. But I can't tell you what struggles do for everyone. I can tell you what they've done for me. And when we say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, that is somewhat true. But I've also been in such a dark place that suicide or killing myself was a thought. Now, that is always an emergency that I want you to seek professional help for. But I share it to let you know that even someone who is strong, I do believe that I'm strong, can get to that point where things don't matter. And so I'm going to share very specifically the 6 things that my struggles have done in me, the traits that have manifested in me because of my struggle. And I'm going to start with I actually have 6 negative and 6 positive. I'm actually going to start with the negative because I want to be real. This journey is not easy. That although I share my story in strength and power now, and I've done it vulnerably throughout, the pain is real. The depression is real. And so the first thing that comes up for me when I list 6 negatives that have happened to me as a result of my struggles. The first is spiritual conflict. I really believed that God loved me and was going to protect me and protect my children. I really believed that healing for my children were possible. And so in their death, I had a huge spiritual conflict, but I faced things head on, and I continue to work through that spiritual conflict. And today I am a better person, not just stronger, but more empathetic, intuitive, spiritually stronger person. I think this is the case for everyone. Negative self-talk. Struggles impact the way you talk to yourself, and maybe even deeper, the beliefs. So I'm giving this 2, right? So we have, for me, it was spiritual conflict and then negative thoughts and negative beliefs. I call them core connections. They go deeply. Negative thoughts are things that pop in your head that you know are really not true. Like I might say I'm a bad mother. I didn't do enough. I know those things are not actually true, but I'm not enough. I'm never going to be enough. No matter how hard I try, I'm not going to get what I'm working for. Those are, I call them core connections, core beliefs. They run deep. It's not just about losing my children. And I'm working through those. And I am often, it goes way deeper than just gratitude and affirmation statements. Like, you have to change your belief system when they go that deep. The fourth thing for me in the negative is depression. You know, I mentioned I've struggled with depression before I even had a reason to be depressed. And now, after losing my children and my husband and being alone and kind of redefining myself and figuring things out, I have struggled on and off with depression. And it's real. I mean, there are times in my life that I have met criteria for clinical depression. I used to never be anxious. Number 5 is anxiety for me. I was a go-getter. I wasn't afraid of anything, adventure girl. Now I'm afraid. Life is hard. Bad things happen to good people. And that's how my struggle has changed my anxiety, because like my reality is hard and painful, and there's no guarantee that something else bad won't happen. And so I am newly struggling with anxiety. And then the last negative for me is just tired. I have been adamant about I'm going to confront my grief. I'm going to make my mental health my priority, and I am going to figure these things out. I am going to work through these things. And when life just keeps coming and the negative thoughts creep back in, even though you're trying to get rid of them, sometimes you just get tired. And if you've watched my grief documentary, in the midst of, I chose to grieve solid every day for 45 days. And somewhere in the middle, I was so exhausted that death didn't scare me. I didn't have a plan to complete suicide or anything like that. But they're like, why? I'm tired. This is really hard work. So those are the 6 negatives. That is me just being really vulnerable. As I was going through that, did you write down a couple negatives that your struggles are putting on you? Well, let's find the positives to that. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? I am stronger, but I don't want people to be this strong. I'll tell you, losing Reggie was hard, but losing Maya, there is nothing in this world that could happen that would be that bad. And so I'm stronger because of it. I'm like, I could handle anything. I'm also wiser. And you often see this in the mental health profession. It's not just book smart, right? Like mental health professionals who have been through some things and overcome some things make really good providers, right? It's not just about the things that we learn in school and in textbooks. It's about like, how do you actually do that? Because it's not as easy as the textbooks say. I'm a big proponent of cognitive behavioral therapy. All my work and my courses are based on cognitive behavioral therapy. And I can tell you, changing the way you think in order to change the way you feel and choose is hard work, especially when you are processing grief and trauma and the world just has not given you that safety and security. So I am wiser. I'm more empathetic to other people's story. Like, not just someone who has lost a child, but there are people in my life that I love dearly who have been through as much grief as me, but also some pretty bad trauma in their childhood. And they're making choices that maybe I wouldn't want to make, and I can be empathetic that if I'm struggling this much and they have this additional stuff, it makes sense. It makes sense, the choices that they're making. It makes sense that the pain is too much, that they can't process it right now. So I am stronger, wiser, more empathetic. I'm also more intuitive. Remember I told you the spiritual conflict? And I believe that God was my protector, my counselor. He was going to take care of me. And I do believe that in a very different way now. And I'm more intuitive to eternity, and that time and space is not all there is, and that I will see my children again. And I know that, right? That's intuitive. I don't just believe it because I read a verse or was taught that by a pastor. Intuitive means I actually have that connection. And it has really resolved that spiritual conflict because I know, and my children have spoken to me, and I have eternal relationship with them. And so my struggles have also made me more intuitive, made me more balanced, that things are not black and white. When we're young and possibly before struggle, or I don't know, there's adults that have very black and white thinking. We think that if we just do this and this will happen. I remember when I was raising my kids, reading parenting books, and they'd say, if you just do this and this is how your child will behave. It didn't work. My 2 biological children had this rare neurodegenerative condition. My adopted children had lots of trauma and trust. And so none of that worked. 1 + 1 did not equal 2. And I realized it just in life, I'm more of a balanced person now. I can see both sides. I look at, our political environment, or even, Western medicine environment, all of these things that are like black and white thinking. And the reality is everything is gray. And I can now see that. I have a much more balanced approach to life and my experiences. And lastly, I am more content. mostly because my spiritual journey of being able to, and I'm still practicing this, but learning to be present, not feeding into the negative. And I am just more of a content person now. So as I share my story and probably wrote down some negative things, did you come up with at least 6 positive things that have happened because of your struggle? I hope so. That's part of the journey. Part of the journey is making sure that we can find more positive than negative, which I know in the midst, it might be hard, but don't give up on trying to find that. I believe that you are mentally strong. Let's go into some questions. I got a question. My wife says that my struggles and my past life is impacting me, but I don't think so. And I guess you're asking my opinion of whether your wife is right or you're right. It's impossible for me to say that, but I can confidently say that all of our struggles impact us in some ways. It can be in positive ways, but if the person who is, I'm assuming, closest to you sees something, and it sounds like there's a defense to that, I would just take some time to, it's not about whether she's right or wrong. What's happening right now that makes the person who's closest to you think you haven't dealt with something, right? So, and again, relationship dynamics can be very tricky. But I always say self-reflect when those things trigger you. It obviously pushed a button for you to ask that question, right? So just do some self-evaluation. It's not about right and wrong. It's about someone who cares about you. I'm assuming she cares about you. Pointing something out, and just do some self-reflection. Second question, I struggle with depression and anxiety, and medication's not really working. This is twofold. Depression, there is often a time for medication in depression. And, talking to your provider about, that it's not really working. Is there something better? There are new medications coming out. There's new things to talk about. Don't give up on medication if you think there's a biochemical process that needs to be corrected, right? But even with the best medication, the perfect medication for you, it's only about 50%. Our mental health is more than just biochemical. It's never going to be just a medication. We are physical beings, right? So if there's biochemical things going on, let's treat those. But we're also mental, emotional, spiritual beings, right? And there's way more to depression than just biochemical. So, for me, the spiritual conflict caused a lot of depression, right? And so kind of getting to how your struggles are impacting you and what, working through that in a cognitive behavioral way. Watch some of my videos on the Mentally Strong Method, see a professional counselor. It's medications only addressing the physical. It's not addressing the whole depression, the whole person. Last question, is depression always from your struggles? I think I kind of answered that a little bit in the last one. We are physical, mental, emotional, spiritual beings. And the spiritual has kind of been weeded out of professional services because of the fear of proselytizing, somebody trying to turn you to their belief system. So, but we are spiritual beings. We have an eternal soul. And so that has to be addressed, which nobody talks about. But I think you're asking, is it like biochemical or from your struggles? And it doesn't matter. What comes first, the chicken or the egg? If you have symptoms of depression, then you have depression. That is something that you are struggling with. Whether you're predisposed to that because of genetic or biochemical things, There's lots of theories, from scientific theories of, kind of genetic predisposition. There's also learned theories and environmental theories. There is toxic environment theories, but it doesn't matter. Like, you still have to treat it as a physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual problem. So all four. So addressing it physically in some way is important. Western medicine will say, antidepressant medications. Eastern medicine would say energetic work of like acupuncture, Ayurvedic, changing, lifestyle choices. Functional medicine or naturopathic doctors will, have other treatment options. So we have to address the physical, but not just the physical. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. If you want to keep watching, especially about grief, and as you've heard my story, is your grief turning into depression?